Gabby Scanlon celebrated her 18th birthday at the Oscar bar. The bartender made her an incredibly beautiful cocktail. After sipping the drink, the girl began to choke. She was then taken to the hospital. Gabby began celebrating her birthday at the bar and ended up on the operating table, alongside the doctors who were performing emergency surgery to remove part of her stomach. Everything ended well. Gabby survived and sued the bar. Such cases are not uncommon. Any adequate bartender should warn you that you can drink a cocktail with liquid nitrogen only after the magic fog has dissolved. But Gabby's case is perhaps the least that liquid nitrogen is capable of. But first, the great news. Perhaps the deepest and most complex mobile game in the galaxy, Raid Shadow Legends, has received a cool update. As you already know, Raid is not only a regular sponsor of the Riddle channel, it's a huge universe of exciting quests, clan wars, the most hardcore bosses, and of course, my favorite mode, PvP Arena. You can unlock 500 collectible champions, and each of them has a unique tree of skills and trillions of pump-up options via the help of artifacts. The fastest way to level up your champions is through farming the campaign. You grind XP and get a load of silver and a few artifacts at the same time. Raid has 16 different factions, such as orcs, dwarves, undead hordes, and many more. My favorite faction is Banner Lords. Look how badass they look. On top of that, a cool update was recently released. A global reconfiguration and rebalancing of more than 20 champions was carried out, and the arena battles have become even more difficult and epic. There's also a new location, Forge, that allows you to create high-quality artifacts even faster. So, what are you waiting for? Go to the video description, click on the special links, and if you're a new player, you'll get 100,000 silver, plus 50 gems, plus 1 energy refill, and 1 free champion, Executioner. All this treasure will be available here only for the next 30 days, and only for new players. Good luck, and I'll see you there. It's all about the extremely low temperature of nitrogen. Minus 196 degrees Celsius. If you swallowed even a small amount, you would feel the cold, which would seem hundreds of times stronger than any substance that you could taste on this planet. Only liquid helium, which is about 70 degrees colder than nitrogen, can surpass these sensations. But the searing cold is just the tip of the iceberg. As soon as the substance passed the esophagus and entered the stomach, you would experience a truly hellish pain. The internal organs of a person are not protected by dense skin, such as the entire outside of your body. The deadly cold liquid would destroy everything it came into contact with. If you drink a cocktail that has just a tiny dose of nitrogen in it, you could get rid of belching, heartburn, indigestion, or even lose half of your stomach, as in Gabby's case. Not exactly the gift people dream about on their birthday, but you could live with it. But as soon as you drank a whole shot, you would immediately experience an incredible range of different sensations. The boiling point of nitrogen is minus 195.7 degrees Celsius. This means that when it entered your body, the substance would immediately begin to evaporate. Moreover, as a result, gaseous nitrogen is hundreds of times more expansive. One shot is capable of forming about 25 liters of gas. If your stomach can accommodate such an amount, you should make sure that you're really human. Your stomach would begin to swell quickly until it burst like a balloon. Further, everything depends on the individual characteristics of each organism. But in most cases, there would be loss of consciousness and then death would be close. In 1997, a student at Worcester Polytechnic, for some unknown reason, poured liquid nitrogen into his mouth and decided to blow out a few rings of smoke. But instead, he accidentally swallowed the substance. As a result, the guy received a punctured hole in his stomach and a destroyed lung, and also lost part of his stomach and badly damaged his gastrointestinal tract. I cannot guarantee the veracity of this story since it doesn't say anything about his mouth, which should have also suffered serious injuries, which is strange. However, that isn't important right now. You get the point. The gas would look for a way out and would find one. And yet, even in this case, you could still be saved if you promptly called an ambulance. But I wouldn't test it in practice. And now, something really extreme. After which, you would have to call a funeral home, not an ambulance. I would call this experiment the Big Bang. Now that you've tasted a shot, it's time to increase your dose and drink a whole glass of nitrogen in one gulp. In this case, more than 100 liters of gas would evaporate inside your stomach. This would create pressure that would lead to... You already understand what this would lead to. 2006, Texas A&M University. An explosion of incredible force thundered on the second floor. As Derek Lowe writes in his blog,
"The front door and the wall of the laboratory were blown out into the corridor. All the other walls of the laboratory were 4 to 8 inches off the floor. All windows, except one open one, were blown out into the courtyard. The tank itself punctured the ceiling and came to rest under the roof on the 3rd floor of the building, leaving behind a 20-inch hole in the ceiling."
And as you can probably already guess from the context, inside this tank was just that, liquid nitrogen. So, after drinking a whole glass, you would feel like this building, an incredibly spectacular and almost instant death. I won't describe the bloody details because a story about scattering human intestines may not please YouTube, and you wouldn't be able to watch this video. There's no point in increasing the nitrogen dose further, so we move on to the second phase of our experiments. Right now, turn up your imagination to its maximum. Imagine a huge pool filled with liquid nitrogen. What would happen if you jumped into it? The first problem is that it would be impossible to fill the pool with liquid nitrogen. In any unprepared container, the substance very quickly turns into gas. But you could use a Dewar vessel or a cryostat, special containers that maintain the necessary temperature so that liquid nitrogen remains liquid and doesn't evaporate. It doesn't matter where we got such a large vessel to fit an entire person inside it. This is just a thought experiment. It all starts with a drop. If only one drop of this substance fell on your hand, or for example, you put your hand into a reservoir of liquid nitrogen and quickly pulled it out, nothing would happen. You wouldn't even get frostbite. It's all about the Leidenfrost effect. Liquid nitrogen doesn't burn immediately. On average, a person's hand temperature is a little over 29 degrees Celsius, and the boiling point of nitrogen is much lower, minus 195 degrees Celsius. Thus, when in contact with the human body, nitrogen forms an insulating vapor layer. Thanks to this layer, the drop seems to float above the surface and doesn't come in contact with any part of the body. But this effect only lasts for a few seconds. After that, the magic disappears. And if you didn't shake the nitrogen off your hand in time, you could get frostbite. But if you poured a whole bucket of liquid nitrogen on your neighbor, you could win your war with them. Their hair and clothing would immediately absorb large amounts of nitrogen. Due to the constant contact of wet clothes against the skin, a layer of steam wouldn't appear, and as a result, a person could go to the hospital with severe frostbite. And if you somehow immersed your neighbor in the nitrogen tank, something truly epic would happen. In a matter of seconds, the process of destruction of the body cells would begin. And since the human body is about 60% water, When the tissues froze, the water molecules in the cells would start to combine and form ice crystals. The growing ice would remove all of the moisture from the cells and cause them to shrink. They would then be crushed between ice crystals. Cell membranes would lose their elasticity, and the structure of proteins would be disrupted. All of this means that within about 7 minutes, the consequences would be irreversible. And after an hour, your neighbor would be completely frozen. Moreover, everything wouldn't be as romantic as it was in the legendary Terminator 2. In the film, T-1000 literally turns into an ice sculpture in an instant from the splash of liquid nitrogen alone. And then the Terminator's bullet shatters him into small pieces. Very impressive, but nothing to do with reality. In the life of a robot, you would have to marinate in a vat of liquid nitrogen for at least an hour. As for a person, such experiments were carried out on a famous American show. They froze a pig's head with nitrogen and tried to break it, but the head just cracked, not flying apart into fragments. There are a number of similar experiments that can be found on the internet, but I didn't find a specific explanation for why the body doesn't fly apart. Our fibrous tissue has such incredible elasticity that it doesn't allow the body to effectively fly into millions of small fragments. But why? And under what conditions would a person be scattered into pieces? Perhaps some of you will answer these questions in the comments. I would be grateful for that. And now something that doesn't fit into my head at all. Tardigrades and Osobronchus leeches thrive when completely frozen with liquid nitrogen. Plus, they also come back to life after defrosting. It turns out that tardigrades in extreme situations shrink and retain only 1% of the total moisture in their bodies. This allows them to survive even in outer space. According to researcher Thomas Boothby, it's the protective mechanism of dehydration that allows these creatures to exist in any conditions. But how exactly they do it is still a mystery. As for leeches, according to a study by Japanese biochemists, even after 24 hours in liquid nitrogen, they felt perfectly well.
The organism of leeches has some mysterious mechanism that prevents them from dying from low temperatures,
says Professor Takahiro Kikawada.
I would really like to get to the bottom of this issue.
I hope you understand what all of this means. Big, global teleportation is coming. As soon as humanity unravels the secrets of such organisms and learns to return to life after cryo-freezing any creature on the planet, a truly amazing time will come. A new era. If you and I caught this time during our lifetime, we could freeze ourselves and unfreeze in 100, 200, or maybe in 1,000 years. Sounds pretty dang cool to me. But so far, all that science can do is carry out successful cryopreservation of a body in liquid nitrogen. This special freezing technology allows you to preserve biological tissues without the formation of ice crystals, and therefore without damage. It remains only to figure out how to bring a person back to life after defrosting. That's all for me. I finish my broadcast and start working on a new release. Maybe you should try drilling a hole to the center of the planet and throwing a huge reservoir of liquid nitrogen into it, or try to freeze and smash a nuclear bomb. But I promise that it will be incredibly interesting. Subscribe and also write your ideas for new experiments in the comments.